7-year-old hands, smudged with flour, carefully place another misshapen cookie onto the baking sheet. For Leo, this wasn't just baking. It was a quiet promise whispered to lonely hearts beating behind kennel wire. Each peanut butter oat circle was a tiny beacon against the ache in his own chest, a remedy for a silence left by a beloved friend. He couldn't have known this simple Saturday ritual, born of grief and empathy, was kneading together the ingredients for a miracle, or that the answer to Shelter's quiet desperation would arrive one ordinary afternoon, not as a check in the mail, but as the low rumble of an unexpected white been pulling silently to the curb, ready to change everything. Leo and his mother, Sarah, lived in a small apartment that seemed to hold its breath whenever Sarah wasn't there. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices in the quiet pre-dawn hours and waiting tables under the harsh fluorescent lights of a diner late into the evening. Her love for Leo was a fierce, unwavering sunbeam in her often gray world. But exhaustion shadowed her smile, and the lines of worry seemed etched a little deeper each month. Money was less a conversation topic and more a constant. Quiet hum beneath the surface of their lives, dictating choices, limiting possibilities. For Leo, the quiet hum often felt like emptiness, especially since Buster was gone. 3 months. That's how long it had been since their scruffy, beloved terrier mix had finally let go, leaving a Buster-shaped hole in Leo's young life. Buster had been a keeper of secrets whispered into floppy ears, the warm weight at the foot of his bed, the ecstatic wiggle that greeted him at the door. Now, the silence in the apartment felt vast, echoing. Leo, a naturally observant and sensitive boy, felt the absence keenly. He didn't talk about it much, preferring to trace the worn patch on the rug where Buster used to nap or lose himself in the few photos they had, his small finger hovering over a blurry, happy tail. Sarah saw the change in him, the deepening of his usual quietness into a withdrawn sadness that tugged at her already frayed heart. She tried to bridge the distance with extra bedtime stories, with shared bowls of his favorite macaroni, but her time and energy felt like coins constantly slipping through her fingers. She budgeted carefully, stretching every dollar, meaning extras were luxuries they rarely afforded. Yet, she clung fiercely to belief that kindness was never an extra. It was the essential ingredient. She saw that same belief reflected in her son's gentle heart, in the careful way he'd rescue spiders from the bathtub. It happened during a rare shared weekend afternoon walk, the kind Sarah tried to carve out between shifts. They took a different route, turning down a side street they seldom used, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up storefront with a low, unassuming brick building. A faded, weather-beaten sign read Oak Haven Animal Shelter. Even from the sidewalk, the air vibrated with cacophony of barks, sharp yips of anxiety, deep woofs of boredom, hopeful calls, and the low, sorrowful howls that seemed to snag directly on Leo's heartstrings. He stopped, his head cocked, listening not just to the noise, but to the feeling behind it, drawn by an invisible thread. He walked towards a chain-link fence bordering a small, patchy exercise yard. Inside, dogs paced in separate runs. An older beagle mix, her muzzle gray and eyes clouded with resigned sadness, lay curled on a thin, warm blanket, blinking slowly in the weak sunlight. Further down, a young shepherd mix, all boundless energy and nervous tension, bounced against the wire mesh, letting out sharp, pleading barks. Leo's small hand tightened in Sarah's. He didn't speak, but she saw the dawning recognition in his wide, dark eyes. He wasn't just seeing dogs. He was seeing loneliness, confinement, waiting. He was seeing a reflection of the emptiness he felt inside. He stood there for what felt like a long time, his gaze moving slowly from one enclosure to the next, his brow knitted in profound concentration. The sounds, the sight, the feeling of unspoken need settled deep within him. As they finally turned to leave, the chorus of barks fading slightly behind them, Leo looked up at Sarah, his expression unusually solemn. He asked his mom, his voice barely a whisper and heavy with newfound concern, if shelter dogs ever got special treats, like homemade ones. Sarah considered this, touched by the direction of his thoughts. She answered honestly that sometimes people donated things, packaged treats maybe, but homemade ones were probably not very often. She explained they had lots of rules, and it took time. Leo's gaze drifted back towards the shelter. He remembered the sheer, unadulterated joy that would light up Buster's face at the sight of the peanut butter jar coming out of the cupboard. He remembered the happy thumping of his tail against the kitchen cabinets. An idea sparked, faint but determined, in the quiet space of his grief. He spoke of Buster's cookies, the peanut butter oat ones he loved. He wondered aloud if perhaps they could bake some for those dogs. He gestured back towards Oak Haven, suggesting they could do it so the dogs knew someone remembered them, so they didn't feel forgotten. Sarah looked down at her son, truly seeing him. The earnest plea in his eyes, the slight straightening of his shoulders, the way his focus had shifted entirely from his own loss to perceived needs of others. She mentally calculated the cost of flour, oats, peanut butter, small expenses that felt significant in their tight budget. She thought of her aching feet, the lure of just resting for an hour. But then she saw the flicker of hope in Leo's eyes, a tiny flame rekindled. This wasn't just about cookies. It was about connection, about healing, about nurturing the compassionate heart she cherished in him. She told Leo softly, kneeling to meet his gaze, her fatigue momentarily forgotten, that it was a truly wonderful, incredibly kind idea. A genuine smile touched her lips. Yes, she agreed, they should go home and find that recipe. Let's bake cookies for the shelter dogs, she decided. A small, tentative smile finally reached Leo's eyes, a glimmer of light pushing back the shadows. The first step had been taken. The apartment might still feel quiet, but now it held the promise of purpose, the warm scent of kindness yet to come. The following Saturday morning, their small kitchen buzzed with quiet energy it hadn't felt in months. Sarah had found a simple, dog-safe recipe online. Whole wheat flour, rolled oats, creamy peanut butter, a splash of water, a spoonful of unsweetened applesauce for moisture. She guided Leo's small, determined hands as he carefully scooped and leveled the flour, a fine white powder dusting his eyelashes and the tip of his nose. He was utterly absorbed, his usual shyness replaced by a focused intensity. He stirred the thick, sticky dough with a wooden spoon, his movements serious and deliberate, as if performing a sacred rite. He held up the sticky measuring cup for inspection, asking if it was enough peanut butter. Buster, he reminded her, always liked lots of peanut butter. Sarah replied gently that she thought it was perfect. A pang of missing Buster hit her, sharp and sudden, but it was immediately softened by the sight of her son, so engrossed in his act of giving. Leo insisted on contributing his allowance money, painstakingly saved from helping with dishes, and keeping his small corner of the apartment tidy, to buy the peanut butter and oats. It wasn't much, but the transaction felt important to him, a personal investment in his mission. Sarah showed him how to roll out the dough on a lightly flour counter, not too thin, not too thick. Lacking cookie cutters, they used the rim of a water glass, pressing down firmly to create simple, earnest circles. Leo arranged them meticulously on the grease baking sheet Sarah held steady. As the cookies baked, that warm, nutty aroma began to fill their small apartment, a comforting scent that seemed to push back against a lingering sadness. Leo sat patiently on the cool kitchen floor, knees drawn up, watching the oven timer count down the minutes, his expression rapt. Once cooled, the cookies were a lovely golden brown. Sarah helped him pack them carefully into a sturdy, reusable container. Before snapping the lid shut, Leo tucked in a drawing he'd made earlier that morning, a brightly colored, slightly lopsided depiction of a dog with enormous, happy eyes and a wildly wagging tail. Holding the container felt solid, purposeful. The walk to Oak Haven was different this time. Leo carried the container with both hands, his steps filled with a quiet resolve that hadn't been there before. The nervous fluttering in his stomach was still present, but it was overlaid with determination. As they neared the entrance, the barking seemed louder, more insistent, a wave of canine emotion washing over them. Leo paused at the door, took a deep breath, and glanced up at Sarah. She gave him a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder and whispered that he was doing a wonderful thing. Inside, the air was thick with a sharp tang of disinfectant struggling to overcome the underlying scent of animals and damp concrete. The barking echoed relentlessly off the cinder block walls and bare floors. Behind a scarred wooden counter, piled high with donation forms, stray intake sheets, and vet bills, stood a man who looked as worn down as the building itself. His thinning gray hair was ruffled, deep lines radiated from tired eyes, and his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. He wore a faded blue work shirt, the Oak Haven patch frayed at the edges. He looked up as the bell above the door jingled, his expression guarded, weary. He asked, his voice low and gravelly, devoid of warmth, if he could help them. Not unfriendly, just depleted. Sarah stepped forward. She greeted him and explained they were there last week. She indicated Leo, saying her son had baked some dog treats. They were hoping, she added, it might be okay to leave them for the animals. The man, Mr. Henderson, the shelter manager, as they would soon learn, let out a barely audible sigh. He told the lady he appreciated the gesture. Really he did, but they had procedures. He mentioned strict dietary needs for some animals, potential allergies, explaining it was just safer to stick with the commercial donations. He gestured vaguely toward an overflowing with bags of kibble and commercially packaged biscuits, adding there was too much risk otherwise. His tone conveyed exhaustion more than dismissal. Leo felt his heart sink. He tightened his grip on the container. All that careful measuring, mixing, baking wasted? He stared down at his sneakers, a familiar wave of shyness washing over him. Maybe this was a silly idea after all. But then he thought of the sad beagle's eyes. He thought of the bouncing shepherd's desperate energy. He thought of Buster's happy tail thumps. Summoning a reserve of courage he didn't know he possessed, fueled by empathy, Leo stepped forward, holding the container out towards a tired man. He explained, his voice small but surprisingly clear in the noisy room, that they were special dog cookies. He made them himself, he said, with peanut butter and oats and applesauce. His dog, Buster, he added, had loved them. He lifted his gaze and met Mr. Henderson's weary eyes directly. He thought, he continued, maybe the dogs are like them too, so they wouldn't feel so forgotten. He held the container steady, a silent offering. Mr. Henderson stopped. He looked down at the small boy standing before him, clutching the plastic box like a treasure. He saw the earnestness radiating from his young face, the mention of a lost pet spoken with quiet reverence. His gaze fell on the colorful drawing tucked inside the container. Something shifted in his tired expression. The wall of weary resignation seemed to crack, just a little. A flicker of surprise, maybe even curiosity, softened his features. He looked from Leo's hopeful face to Sarah's supportive one, then back to the container. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. Peanut butter and oats, you say? He asked. He ran a hand over his jaw, considering. A long moment passed, filled only by the barking of the dogs. All right, son, he said finally, his voice a little less gruff. All right. He reached out his large, work-roughened hand surprisingly gentle as he took the container from Leo. He assured Leo he would make sure they got to the right dogs, the ones that could have them. A faint, almost imperceptible lifting occurred at the corners of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. He thanked Leo, adding that it was thoughtful. A wave of pure relief washed over Leo, so potent almost made him dizzy. It was followed by a quiet, steady warmth spreading through his chest. He hadn't just baked cookies. He had delivered them. He had spoken up. He had been heard. As they walked away from the shelter, the cacophony of barking slowly receding, Leo risked a glance back. Through the glass door, he saw Mr. Henderson still standing there, looking down at the container in his hands, a contemplative expression on his face. A connection, fragile as a butterfly's wing, but undeniably real, had been forged over peanut butter cookies. The Saturday ritual had officially begun, and it already felt like so much more than just baking. That initial delivery cemented a routine that quickly became the anchor of Leo's week. Every Saturday morning, the comforting aroma of baking dog treats filled their apartment, a fragrant testament to Leo's quiet dedication. He grew more adept in the kitchen, confidently measuring ingredients, occasionally experimenting by adding a tiny bit of shredded carrot or trying to carve the dough into dog-bone shapes, which usually ended up looking more like lumpy clouds. Sarah remained his steadfast assistant and appreciative audience, cherishing these moments of shared purpose, noticing how the focused activities seemed to smooth the lines of worry from his young brow. Each Saturday afternoon, the walk to Oak Haven became a familiar pilgrimage. Leo's nervousness around Mr. Henderson steadily dissolved, replaced by a burgeoning curiosity and a quiet sense of belonging. He started asking about the animals by name, his voice gaining confidence with each visit. He'd inquire how Daisy was doing this week, peering toward the kennel of the gentle, aging beagle. Mr. Henderson would reply that Daisy was doing okay. He'd lean against the counter, sharing little updates. Still waiting for her person, he'd say, "Gets a bit stiff in the mornings, but perks right up when she smells your cookies coming." He reported she gave a proper tail wag yesterday when he gave her one. Leo's face would illuminate at these small reports. He learned about Max, the boisterous shepherd mix whose boundless energy often intimidated potential adopters. Mr. Henderson explained with a sigh one afternoon, watching Max bounce excitedly as Leo offered a treat through the kennel wire, that Max just needed space to run. Someone who understood his enthusiasm. Leo learned about timid Patches, the calico cat who mostly hid, but whose green eyes would follow Leo's movements curiously. And Rocky, the blocky-headed pit bull mix with meltingly soft eyes, who would lean his entire body against the wire for a gentle word from the boy. As Leo opened up, so did Mr. Henderson. The tired shelter manager slowly revealed a man beneath the weariness. Someone fiercely devoted to these abandoned animals, carrying the weight of their care almost entirely on his own shoulders. He spoke, sometimes hesitantly, about the relentless struggles, the roof that leaked ominously over the back storage room every time it rained hard, the ever-increasing cost of medications and vet visits, the ancient furnace that wheezed and rattled its way through colder nights, threatening to give out completely. He confided one gray afternoon, his voice low, that they had a big adoption event planned last month. They spent weeks promoting it, he shared. Only 3 people showed up. 3. And none of them adopted. He shook his head, the discouragement heavy in his posture. Sometimes, he admitted to Leo, it felt like shouting into the wind. Leo listened, absorbing the man's worries, his young heart aching with empathy. He started seeing the shelter not just as a place for dogs, but as Mr. Henderson's burden, his responsibility, his fading hope. The worn blankets suddenly looked threadbare. The chipped paint seemed sadder. The persistent damp smell in the back room felt more ominous. His desire to help deepened beyond the simple act of baking. He began bringing more than just cookies. He spent hours at home drawing detailed portraits of the shelter residents. Daisy basking in an imaginary sunbeam, Max mid-leap chasing a bright red ball, Rocky offering a soulful gaze. With Mr. Henderson's grateful permission, Leo carefully taped these vibrant drawings to the front of each animal's kennel, injecting splashes of color and personality into the otherwise institutional gray. He explained earnestly that he did it so people could see how special they were. Mr. Henderson started entrusting Leo with small, supervised tasks, carefully refilling water bowls, making sure each was sparkling clean, helping fold donated towels into neat stacks. Sometimes, just sweeping the entryway while Mr. Henderson caught up on paperwork. These shared moments of quiet work solidified their unlikely bond. The gruff facade Mr. Henderson maintained seemed to melt away completely when he was with Leo, revealing the kind, overburdened man beneath, who simply needed a reason to keep believing. Sarah observed the deepening connection and the subtle but profound changes in her son with immense pride and relief. The shadow of Buster's loss hadn't vanished entirely, but it no longer defined Leo's days. His grief had found a positive channel, transforming into consistent, compassionate action. He was learning about responsibility, about dedication, about the quiet strength required to show up for others week after week, even when it wasn't easy. He was learning that kindness, persistently applied, could chip away at even the most formidable walls of despair. One particularly cold and drizzly Saturday, as Leo meticulously arranged his cookies in a container, Sarah watched him, a warmth spreading through her despite the chill outside. She told him softly that Mr. Henderson had mentioned last week that Leo's visits and his cookies were the highlight of the week for him and the animals. What Leo was doing, she emphasized, mattered so much. Leo looked up, his cheeks slightly pink. He met her gaze, his expression serious. He stated simply, as if explaining the most obvious fact in the world, that they counted on him. The dogs needed the cookies, he elaborated, and Mr. Henderson needed the help. He understood the intertwined needs, the delicate ecosystem of hope he had stumbled into. The connection was no longer just about him and the dogs. It was a three-way bond of shared purpose, resilience, and peanut butter treats, holding firm against the shelter's mounting challenges. And outside, the rain continued to fall, each drop a reminder of the leaky roof and the fragility of Oak Haven's future. Month after month, the rhythm held steady. The Saturday morning baking, the afternoon walk, the hopeful faces, both canine and human, greeting Leo at Oak Haven. The shelter remained undeniably worn, its struggles a constant undercurrent. Yet Leo's unwavering presence had woven a thread of light into its fabric. Mr. Henderson seemed to stand a little taller when Leo was around, the deep furrows on his brow occasionally smoothing out into a shared smile over a dog's happy reaction to a treat. Leo, too, had changed. The crippling shyness had eased, replaced by a quiet competence, the bearing of someone who knows their purpose. Then came a Saturday drenched in unexpected sunshine. The air was crisp and clear, holding the first hints of approaching spring. Leo, carrying his container of freshly baked cookies, his bone shapes were now passably recognizable, walked alongside Sarah, chatting animatedly about a pair of bonded cats he hoped would find a home together. He couldn't wait to give Mr. Henderson the latest updates from his school's small animal club. But as they rounded the familiar corner onto Oak Haven Street, the usual scene was disrupted. Parked directly in front of the shelter, its size seeming to dwarf the small building, was a large, immaculate white van. It bore no logos, no identifying marks, just darkly tinted windows that reflected the blue sky. Its engine idled with a low, unfamiliar hum, cutting through the usual symphony of barks. Leo stopped, his brow furrowing. He exchanged a puzzled glance with Sarah. People sometimes parked awkwardly, but this felt different, intentional. He saw Mr. Henderson standing just inside the shelter's open doorway, peering out at the van. The shelter manager's expression wasn't just curious. It held a distinct note of apprehension, his shoulders tense beneath a familiar blue work shirt. He looked older and more burdened than he had just a week before. He saw them approaching and offered a slight, bewildered shrug, confirming he had no idea what was happening. Just as Leo mounted the first step toward the entrance, the driver's side door of the van swung open. A woman emerged, dressed in a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers, radiating an air of brisk professionalism. Her eyes scanned the shelter facade, then landed on Mr. Henderson. Simultaneously, the van side door slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing a man hoisting a large video camera onto his shoulder, followed closely by another adjusting sound equipment. Leo froze, his eyes wide. A news camera? Here? Why? The woman in the blazer approached Mr. Henderson, extending a polished hand. She introduced herself as Carol Martins from Channel 8 News. Her voice was bright, clear, and carried easily. She explained they received a wonderful tip about the work he did there, and specifically about a very dedicated young baker brightening the days of his animals. Mr. Henderson blinked rapidly, momentarily stunned into silence. He took her hand automatically. "Channel 8?" he stammered, his gaze darting towards Leo, then back to the reporter, sudden comprehension mixed with a flush of something like embarrassment dawning on his face. "A tip?" he admitted, his voice barely above a murmur, that he did post a little something online. Just a photo of Leo with old Daisy a few weeks back. He confessed. He'd mentioned Leo's Saturday cookie deliveries on the shelter's Facebook page, never imagining anyone really saw it. Carol Martins beamed. "Someone certainly did," she assured Mr. Henderson. A viewer saw the post. Apparently, it was shared in a local community group, and they called the station's Hometown Hero segment. The viewer felt it was precisely the kind of uplifting story the city needed. She expressed that they would be honored to speak with him, and with young Leo there, if he was willing. Her gaze shifted kindly towards Leo, who was still rooted to the spot, clutching his cookie container as if it were a shield. Before the implications could fully sink in, another vehicle, a sleek silver sedan, pulled up quietly behind the news van. A man in a neat polo shirt embroidered with a familiar logo, a stylized paw print, stepped out. He surveyed the scene, the news crew, the slightly dilapidated shelter, the small group gathered at the door. With a thoughtful expression, he walked directly towards them. He politely but confidently interjected, asking if he was speaking to Mr. Henderson. He introduced himself as David Chun, regional manager for Petopia, indicating the logo on his shirt, representing the well-known pet supply chain. He apologized for interrupting, but explained he also saw that Facebook post making the rounds this morning, the one about the boy and his homemade cookies for the shelter dogs. He smiled warmly, saying it was incredibly touching. He drove straight over from their downtown store. He added, because he had to see this for himself. Leo stared, his mind struggling to process the sudden convergence. Channel 8 News, Petopia, cameras, microphones, all here, all because of a photo, because of his cookies. The ordinary Saturday had fractured, replaced by a surreal tableau of unexpected attention. Mr. Henderson looked utterly adrift, his gaze bouncing between the reporter, the Petopia manager, and Leo, his face a canvas of shock, anxiety, and beneath it all, the undeniable flicker of fragile, almost unbelievable hope. The arrival of the van wasn't just an interruption. It felt like a hinge turning, swinging open a door to possibilities previously unimaginable. The air, thick with the scent of peanut butter cookies, now crackled with the energy of imminent change. The scene unfolded with a sudden, dizzying momentum. Carol Martins, the reporter, knelt slightly, bringing her microphone closer to Leo with a reassuring smile. She confirmed his name, mentioning his mom told them. She asked gently if he could tell them, just in his own words, why he started this wonderful baking project. Leo swallowed, the camera lens feeling like a giant, unblinking eye. He glanced toward Sarah, who offered a silent, encouraging nod. He tightened his grip on the cookie container, grounding himself. He began, his voice soft but clear, explaining that they lost their dog, Buster, a few months ago. His voice hitched almost imperceptibly. And Buster, he continued, really, really loved homemade treats. So he thought. He gestured towards the shelter building, the unseen dogs within. He thought maybe the dogs here, waiting for their forever homes. Maybe they like some too. To feel remembered? Not so lonely? He looked earnestly at the reporter, adding that they were good dogs. They just needed someone to give them a chance. His simple, unadorned honesty seemed to touch everyone present. Carol Martin's professional smile melted into genuine warmth. She murmured that it was incredibly kind and thoughtful before turning her attention and microphone towards Mr. Henderson. She asked him to describe what these weekly visits from Leo had meant to him and the animals at Oakhaven. The question acted like a key, unlocking a reservoir of emotion pent up behind Mr. Henderson's weary facade. His gruffness vanished, replaced by a vulnerability that was deeply moving. His eyes, already etched with years of worry, brimmed with sudden tears that caught the bright afternoon sunlight. "Meant?" He echoed, his voice thick, choked. He took a shaky breath, struggling for composure. This boy, Leo, showing up here like clockwork, every Saturday. Doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, or boiling hot. With these cookies, he gestured helplessly, his gaze sweeping over the worn building. Things have been desperate here, he explained. Donations dried up, bills piling higher every month. Vet costs, roof leaks. His voice broke. Honestly, there were days, he confessed. He stared at the numbers and thought this was it, that they couldn't keep going. Tears now streamed freely down his weathered cheeks, and he made no effort to wipe them away. And then this kid started coming. He continued, so quiet, so serious about his baking mission. At first, maybe he didn't pay enough attention, but he kept coming, learned the dogs' names, their stories, drew pictures for their kennels. He looked directly into the camera lens, his voice trembling but filled with conviction. Seeing him, seeing his unwavering kindness, his dedication, it was like a light flickered back on in a dark room. It reminded him why he did this, why he hadn't given up. He gave him hope when he was running on empty. He declared Leo had been a lifeline. Sarah stood nearby, her own eyes shining, one hand instinctively going to her heart. Pride for her son warred with profound empathy for this dedicated man who had clearly poured his entire life into this struggling sanctuary. David Chun, the Petopia manager, had been observing the exchange, his expression shifting from professional interest to visible emotion. The authenticity of the scene, the boy's earnestness, the man's raw gratitude, the palpable need of the unseen animals was undeniable. As the camera swung toward him, he stepped forward decisively. He began, addressing Mr. Henderson and Leo, his voice resonating with sincerity. What they had fostered here, the connection, the kindness, he stated, was truly remarkable. Petopia was committed to animal welfare in their communities, and frankly, he paused, looking from Mr. Henderson's tear-streaked face to Leo's wide eyes. He could not imagine a more deserving recipient of support or a more inspiring example of compassion than what he was seeing right there. He addressed the camera, but his message was clearly for the man and the boy beside him. Therefore, he announced with incredible pleasure, on behalf of Petopia, a donation of a full year's supply of their highest quality dog food to Oakhaven Animal Shelter. A collective intake of breath came from Sarah and Mr. Henderson. The shelter manager stared, momentarily speechless, his jaw slack. Furthermore, David Chen continued, a broad smile spreading across his face. They would be providing brand new, orthopedic bedding for every single animal enclosure in the facility, both dogs and cats. He glanced meaningfully towards a roofline, and they understood there had been some infrastructure challenges. Petopia, he declared, would fund the complete repair of the shelter's roof, effective immediately. The relief that washed over Mr. Henderson was a physical transformation. It was as if invisible burdens dissolved from his shoulders. He swayed slightly, covering his face with his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs of profound relief. Sarah gently placed a supportive hand on his trembling arm. But David Chun had one more announcement. He turned and knelt down, bringing himself eye to eye with Leo. He told Leo, his voice filled with genuine admiration, that his simple act of kindness had created ripples he couldn't have imagined. To recognize his incredible heart and dedication, Petopia would like to present him with this. From Portfolio, he produced a beautifully framed certificate, identifying it as their official junior ambassador for Animal Welfare Award. He then handed Leo a brightly colored gift card, explaining it was a little something extra, perhaps for more baking supplies, or maybe a special toy he'd been wanting. He told the boy directly that he, young man, was an inspiration. Leo gazed at the certificate, his name printed in bold letters beneath the friendly Petopia logo. He looked up at Mr. Henderson, who was now wiping his eyes, a watery but radiant smile transforming his face. He looked at his mother, whose proud, tearful grin was the brightest he'd ever seen it. He looked back towards the sheltered doors, hearing the familiar chorus of barks from within, but today they sounded different. Less like cries of loneliness, more like calls of anticipation. A slow, wide, incredulous grin spread across Leo's own face. He hadn't baked for rewards, only to offer comfort. Yet, standing there bathed in sunshine and unexpected generosity, a deep, quiet joy filled him. For the dogs, for Mr. Henderson, for the future of Oakhaven. The humble peanut butter cookie, offered with love, had somehow unlocked a floodgate of goodness. The Channel 8 Hometown Heroes segment featuring Leo and Oakhaven aired that very evening, and its impact was instantaneous, like a spark igniting dry tinder. The story resonated deeply within the community. Leo's simple explanation of wanting the dogs to feel less lonely, coupled with Mr. Henderson's tearful gratitude and the stark reality of the shelter's struggles, proved incredibly powerful. The next morning, the phone at Oakhaven began ringing incessantly, almost overwhelming Mr. Henderson, who was now fielding calls with renewed energy. Offers poured in, monetary donations large and small, truckloads of donated food, beyond Petopia's generous pledge, blankets, toys, cleaning supplies. Even more significantly, people offered their time. The trickle of volunteers became a steady stream. People eager to walk dogs, socialize cats, help clean kennels, assist with paperwork, or manage the now active social media page. Most heartwarmingly, adoption applications skyrocketed. Families arrived, specifically asking to meet the dogs Leo had mentioned or drawn pictures of. Max, the exuberant shepherd mix, found his perfect match in an active family who adored his energy and enrolled him in agility classes. And Daisy, the sweet, gentle beagle whose clouded eyes had first captured Leo's attention, was adopted by a quiet widow who cherished her calm companionship. Leo was there the day Daisy left, offering her one final homemade cookie and receiving a gentle lick on the cheek in return. Seeing her settled comfortably in the back seat of her new owner's car filled him with a quiet, profound satisfaction. The physical transformation of Oakhaven was remarkable. Within weeks, the leaky roof was expertly repaired and replaced, silencing the drip that had been a constant reminder of decay. The kennels gleamed, each outfitted with a plush new Petopia bed. Volunteers painted colorful, cheerful murals on the previously drab walls. The atmosphere shifted from one of quiet desperation to one of bustling hope and activity. Oakhaven wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. Through it all, Leo remained Leo. Every Saturday, the smell of baking cookies continued to fill his apartment. His mission hadn't changed, even if the circumstances around it had. He still arrived at the shelter, container in hand, though now he was often greeted by name by smiling volunteers. Sometimes, inspired by the news story, other children would shyly ask if they could join him, and Leo, with quiet patience, would share his routine, spreading the ripples of kindness further. He wore the title of Junior Ambassador for Animal Welfare with humble pride, the framed certificate a treasured possession. But the attention had inflated his ego. It had simply affirmed the value of his quiet compassion. His shyness had softened, replaced by a gentle confidence stemming from knowing he made a tangible difference in the world. His friendship with Mr. Henderson deepened into an easy, comfortable rapport. The weary, gruff man was gone, replaced by someone lighter, quicker to smile, his passion for the animals no longer overshadowed by constant financial dread. Mr. Henderson frequently told him, his eyes shining with gratitude, that Leo didn't just bring cookies. He brought them hope. He reminded everyone they were here. Sarah watched her son, her heart overflowing. The journey had not only saved a beloved local shelter, but had profoundly healed Leo. His grief for Buster hadn't disappeared, but had transformed into a powerful force for good, blossoming into an empathy that had touched hundreds of lives, both human and animal. Her pride in him was immense, a quiet, steady glow. Months melted into a year. Oak Haven was now a beacon in the community, known for its happy animals and dedicated team. Adoptions were regular, volunteers were plentiful, and the future looked secure. Leo, now 8, still arrived faithfully each Saturday. One sunny afternoon, Mr. Henderson found him not by the kennels handing out treats, but sitting quietly inside an enclosure designated for new, nervous arrivals. Curled in the far corner was a small, trembling terrier mix, overwhelmed by the strange sounds and smells. Leo wasn't trying to force interaction. He was simply sitting there, cross-legged on the clean floor, reading softly from a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web. His bag of peanut butter cookies rested beside him, unopened. He was offering the scared little dog the most valuable gift of all, his calm, patient, reassuring presence. It was a moment unseen by cameras, unheralded by news reports, yet it perfectly encapsulated the enduring spirit of Leo's kindness. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the unexpected rewards. It was about the consistent, quiet showing up, the unwavering empathy, the simple belief that every heart, no matter how small or scared, deserved to feel safe and remembered. The legacy of a boy, his lost dog, and a batch of homemade cookies continued, warming Oak Haven one gentle word, one patient moment, one peanut butter treat at a time.